Welcome to this week's edition of the Maza's Musings podcast. We've had a few Disney-related and Disney-specific episodes the past few weeks. So this week we're switching gears a little bit and we're getting ramped up for the NFL season. Now, by the time you listen to this episode, the season's actually already begun. This episode coming out on Friday. There was a game on Thursday between the Ravens and the Chiefs, but the New England Patriots begin their season on Sunday. So to help us get ready for that, we have Mass Live's Karen Guregian joining us, and she's going to give us her impressions on the team, on this new regime, and what we can reasonably expect heading into the 2024 season. Now, before that, we will have our Maza's Mickey Minute where we'll go over a couple of news items and we will announce the winner of the giveaway. Thank you to Emily from We Do Travel Right for providing us with this great prize. It's a tumbler from Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point, which is Disney Cruise Line's new destination. And hey, before we get into any of that, I really want to thank everybody who has listened to the podcast, who has subscribed, who has given a rating or a review, or has shared our social media or interacted with us on social media. All of that stuff is great. It helps us reach new audiences, and we really want to engage the existing audience that we have. So thank you very much for all of that. If you haven't connected with us, you can find the podcast pretty much anywhere you find your podcasts. And you can connect with us on social media. There's Maza's Musings Pod, which is our Instagram and Threads handle. We also have the Maza's Musings podcast Facebook page, so you can connect with us there. If you're interested in knowing more about the podcast, you can always go to mazasmusings.wordpress.com. You'll find more information on me and what this podcast is all about. You can find past episodes. You can find where to find the podcast regularly and what services we're on. And you can also find contact information and links to our link tree. One more way to get in touch with us or to understand what's going on with the podcast is our new newsletter, where we will have information on what the upcoming episode is going to be, what the past episode that you might have missed was all about. And we'll also have, if there are any giveaways that we're doing or things that we think that you'd be interested in, we'll throw those your way, and any other kind of interesting topics. Now, this podcast is a catch-all for things that interest me and that I think will interest you. So the newsletter is basically kind of a microcosm of that in and of itself. So if you are interested in the podcast and learning more, visit our social media, visit our website, and subscribe to the newsletter. You can also reach out directly to me at mazasmusings@gmail.com, and I would love to hear from you. Well, now that that is all out of the way, let's get on with the podcast. And here we go.
Donald, wake up! It's showtime! Don't forget the orchestra!
Ah, there you are. And just in time.
Mom says there's even more magical stuff now.
For those of you standing, please hold on to the handrails throughout our journey and stay clear of the doors.
Hang on to them hats and glasses, cause this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
And here we go!
All right, so for today's Maza's Mickey Minute, we have a few quick things that we need to get through before we give away that Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point tumbler, and we're going to get right to it. So on social media recently, I posed the question, of course, Anger being one of my favorite characters of the new Inside Out movies. I asked people, what about their favorite sports team turns them into anger? So I got a couple of responses. Greg Cameron, who's been on the podcast before talking sports, basically sent this on Twitter. He said, I'm angry because my team chose this guy basically to play left tackle. And it's the meme of the security guy who's just kind of, quickly, swiping through everybody as opposed to actually patting them down. Much better of a visual than than me trying to explain it, but very funny at the time. We also had Joe, who is from the Mouse Tales show, which is a great Disney podcast. If you're not listening to it, I would suggest that you do. You can find it on most places where you find your podcasts. So Joe said, I am angry because my team is the Chicago White Sox. Enough said. So I actually asked Joe, I said, does that make you anger or sadness? To which he said, I've gone through every emotion with that team this season. He says, I'm working on a script for a third movie about a Sox fan during the 2024 season. And it's settled just a bit Inside Out 3. So, how does your favorite sports team make you feel? Does it make you feel anger? Or maybe joy? Or maybe disgust? Let me know. Shoot me an email, mazasmusings@gmail.com. Now let's get into a little bit of news this week. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because by the time that you're hearing this, it's a little bit of old news, but I felt it was worth noting. So first of all, at Hollywood Studios at Walt Disney World, Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy is going to be replaced by a villains show. Now, from the Disney Parks blog, the creative minds at Disney Live Entertainment will transform Sunset Showcase into the mysterious and reflective realm of the Magic Mirror. The show will feature appearances by dozens of infamous evildoers, with fiendish foes Cruella de Vil, Captain Hook, Maleficent, each breaking through the glass to take the stage in live production numbers. Sounds like a great show, and it really seems like they're leaning hard into this villains thing while kind of repurposing and refocusing Cars to the Magic Kingdom area. Spreading villains among the different parks is an interesting move, but I think it makes some sense as it's something that can that can equate wherever you go. And having shows, live performances at Hollywood Studios also makes a ton of sense to me, especially because you've got the Stunt Spectacular, you have the Beauty and the Beast show, you have Fantasmic. So all of that, it kind of makes sense to me. The other bit of news that will affect people who have upcoming trips is the Tron Light Cycle. They're going to be doing away with the virtual queue, and they're going to open a standby queue starting Monday, September 9th. That's this upcoming Monday. Now, the virtual queues will still remain open through September 8th. And once the standby line opens, you will be able to do the Lightning Lane single passes for that as well. Previously known as the individual Lightning Lanes. So with that, it kind of smooths things out a little bit at Magic Kingdom, because previously when Tiana's Bayou Adventure and the Tron Light Cycle were both virtual queues, you couldn't get in the virtual queue for both of them. You had to pick one or the other. So this streamlines that operation. Now there are only 2 attractions right now that have the virtual queue, one of them being Tiana's and the other one being the Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. So, smoothing things out a little bit. I think that Tron is something that at this point, the novelty has died down a little bit, and it's more part of the fabric of Magic Kingdom now. So I think that there may be longer lines for this, but it's not something that necessarily needs the virtual queue option. So with that said, we are going to get right to the giveaway now. And we had a great amount of participation from people who connected with us on social media, specifically Instagram, for this contest. I really want to thank Emily from We Do Travel Right for being a part of this and really, offering the prize for this. So thank you to everybody who participated, and thank you to Emily. We will get right to the selection, and we're going to do it live right here as we're recording. So here we go. Leah Vasquez, congratulations. You are the proud new owner of a Lookout K at Lighthouse Point tumbler from We Do Travel Right. Congratulations. I am sure you will be hearing from Emily shortly so that you can get your prize. And once again, congratulations and thank you to everyone who participated. And hopefully we'll be able to do more giveaways and things like this in the future. A good way to keep an eye on that is to sign up for our newsletter, where we will let you know whenever these kinds of things are coming up, or other giveaways that we're not associated with that we think you will find cool. So thank you very much to everybody, and especially to We Do Travel Right, which of course is your certified Disney vacation planner. And they are an earmarked gold producer. Now, what that means is they are offering a concierge level vacation planning service, and they're going to help you with your trip, whether it's to Disney, whether it's to Universal Studios, whether you're taking a cruise or going to an all-inclusive resort. They take away the stress so you can just focus on vacationing. And one of the things that I really love about Emily and her team, but specifically Emily, is she has a background in education. So on top of really coaching and teaching her team to be the best that they can possibly be, she's really fostered this education aspect in the vacation planning. So they have seminars. When you book a trip with them, that you have a study hall where they're going to be giving you information all the time on, these are things you might want to know for your trip, or this is something that you might want to plan for. They also are constantly doing videos to show you things like, how to use the new Lightning Lane multipass and things like that. And of course, there's always someone there to answer your questions, and they approach their answers in a way that's going to be easy for you to understand so that you don't have this high level of anxiety going into a trip. Especially Disney vacations can be complex. So they try to make it as simple as possible by not only doing things for you, but teaching you how you can get the most out of your vacation. So anyway, if you are looking to get your next magical vacation started, you can contact We Do Travel Right at wedotravelright.com/Maza. That's wedotravelright.com/MAZA. And somebody will get in touch with you very shortly. Tell them Chris Maza sent you.
Now I can't do any more damage around this popsicle stand.
So long, partner.
See you real soon.
Well, I have Karen Guregian with me from Mass Live. Karen's been with Mass Live since 2023, but she has a long and extensive history covering the New England Patriots and sports professionally for decades, and really is just a wealth of knowledge. And so we're very happy to have her with us today. Karen, thank you very much for the time. Thank you for being here, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Happy to come on with you.
Now, I'm just going to jump right into it. Obviously, I think fans are honestly a little bit let's say, tentative and not really sure what to expect this year. It had been basically 20 years of knowing what you're going to expect. It's going to be a certain kind of offense. They're going to run defense and have a certain philosophy on defense. And even the way they build their roster was really something that was kind of predictable for a long time. So I really want to explore kind of the approach and what you've seen from Jerod Mayo and Eliot Wolf as they start their tenure as the leaders of this team. So we'll start off first. I guess one thing that Jerod Mayo has gotten some criticism for actually is his approach with the media, and obviously from the outside looking in, there's a certain perception, but from your standpoint, how have you seen the way that he obviously he talks a lot more freely than his predecessor did, but how have you seen his approach with the media, and do you see him having any kind of growing pains in terms of how he's trying to get his message across to the media and the fan base?
Mm. Well, first, I think it's interesting how uh, we used to be critical of Coach Belichick for like stonewalling, saying nothing, offering nothing. And now we have a coach who is like the polar opposite and
Right.
actually gives you something, and we're critical of that too. So I don't think anyone can win. But in Gerard's case, I think he's, trying to be as transparent as possible and to a fault. It's almost like he's giving too much information, and in the process, I mean, he's telling what he feels at the moment and then
Sure.
ultimately contradicting himself throughout the process. So it is growing pains for him. He's learning, uh, you know, what to say, what he can't say, even though he does say it. You know what I'm saying? So,
Sure.
uh, but a lot of people think he's sort of past the grace period,
Hmm.
Um, but again, I think he's a smart enough guy that he'll figure it out. Uh, but my hope is he doesn't completely lose some of the transparency and the honest answers that he's been giving us.
Sure. Yeah, one of the things that I think people have been confused about, and I think that the media is also having a hard time conveying what they understand to be his plan, is the approach to the quarterback position. When you're saying that's a competition and Drake May has outplayed Jacoby Brissett, and then at the end of the day, you're still going with Jacoby Brissett. As you said, there's some contradiction there.
Mixed messaging, yeah.
Yeah, and there's been some who have even gone as far as to say that Drake May should be miffed at this, and that the message is that this is a competition, and then it turns out maybe not so much. But I guess my take on that is more that that would be valid if the players had the same amount of context as we do on the outside. And I have to think that that there's a different approach and more information that they're receiving in the locker room than we're receiving on the outside and in the media. And I guess that ties into my next thing, which from what you've seen and from what you've heard from people that you've talked with, how do you see Mayo connecting with his locker room, getting his message across to the locker room, and getting his team to buy in?
Hmm. Well, I think he has a good connection with the players. I think he's open with them, and he encourages them to be open with him without getting their heads bitten off. So, so I think he has that connection. But just getting back to the mixed messaging part, my belief is, um, Jacoby Brissett was going to be the starter,
Right.
unless, he got hurt during camp, or unless Drake just wowed the socks off of everybody and like completely, beat out Jacoby by a mile. I
Hmm.
think that was kind of an understood thing, and Jerod did set the stage saying, look, at the start, Jacoby's our quarterback. Of course, Drake has a chance at it, but again, he's going to have to kind of overwhelm us. I think by Jerod continually saying it was a competition, I think, I think Drake was being a little bit passive or not really pushing the envelope the way that the team
Mm.
wanted him to. It's almost like he was sort of being polite, accepting his fate, you know, and I think Jerod putting it out there, hey, this is a competition. He was trying to push, I think he was trying to push more out of May, and he got it, toward the end. When he talked about Drake outplaying Jacoby, I think it was the reverse. I think he was trying to push Jacoby and say, hey, you're a starter, but let's not take that for granted.
Sure.
The delivery just didn't come off as well because he kept pounding home the competition element of it. And one guy outplayed the other, and yet he's not the starter. How does that compute? So, making a long story short, I think he's very transparent with the guys in the locker room. I think they know the score, regardless of what's being said in the media. At least that's the sense I get from the guys in the room.
Yeah, and one thing that seems to bother him sometimes is this idea, this term "players coach," and I think that that's because that comes with a connotation that he's going to be
Soft.
easier on guys in some respects, but that's
Yeah.
not the vibe that I've really gotten.
No, and I mean, he's had them out there working hard in pads, 2.5, almost 3 hour practices. Like during training camp, from the practices we saw, he had them out there a long time.
Hmm.
And he had them in pads day after day after day. So, um, you know, I wouldn't call that being soft.
Sure.
Um, and and you're right, he does push back at that connotation, but there's a fine balance that again he's trying to weigh as a head coach who wants to have open communication with the players. He doesn't want to rule out of fear, uh, which I think uh, was kind of how the previous regime
Hmm.
ruled. But by the same token, he doesn't want the players to think that they're in a country club either, you know?
Sure.
So again, when you talk about Jerod learning on the job, he's learning to find that balance between, lightening the air, lightening the mood, not having so much stress in the air. Again, it's just a different philosophy. I think Coach Belichick thought if guys were on edge, they would perform better. Their jobs
Sure.
are on the line. Whereas I think Jerod wants to take the stress away, thinking the players will perform better in a less stressful environment. But by the same token, as I said, he's not running a country club either.
Sure. Now, the other side of this whole equation now is there is somebody else in charge of personnel. We've got Eliot Wolf now kind of leading that group. I know that, originally there was some um, uncertainty as to whether or not he was going to be the guy, and then eventually we got that. That more concrete kind of hierarchy. Um, but looking at what Eliot Wolf has done in terms of you know, constructing this roster and really building this team, which we know is in the midst of kind of a transitional period, not just in terms of leadership, but just overall, you know, how do you see what were your expectations for Wolf and company going into even the draft and through this whole free agency process? And where do you think they've done well, and what blind spots do you think they've had?
Well, I think, you know, given where Eliot's come from, given who his father is, what Ron Wolf, who was a longtime executive of the Green Bay Packers, you know, it's like one by one on the checklist. Eliot's kind of checking off the boxes of kind of, you know, what he learned from his father on how to run run a team and
Sure.
and be a general manager. What does that mean? It's strongly rooted in drafting and developing players. It's rooted in identifying who your core players are and extending them. So again, there's two check boxes because they re-signed quite a few of their own people in-house.
Sure.
They're relying a lot on this year's draft, and I believe as well as last year's draft. And I think they're taking the approach that kind of slow and steady is going to win the race. You know, they can't. It's like Rome wasn't rebuilt in a day. They're not going to rebuild this team to be a contender again overnight. That's not to say there is an urgency year one, but that's just to say that they have a vision and a plan for how to go about this to get, you know, the Patriots back up off the mat. That being said, you know, they went into the offseason with several glaring needs. One was quarterback, check, number 3 overall pick. They knew that, you know, they needed some kind of difference-making weapon. They went after 2 of those guys, Calvin Ridley the first in free agency, and they didn't get him. So they drafted a couple of wide receivers who, while you wouldn't put in the number 1 top tier target, you know, they might, if all goes well, develop into good players. Jalen Polk being prime among them. Where I thought they failed was, you know, they have the quarterback, and it's important to surround him and to have him, you know, give him the best chance to succeed. And with no left tackles on site, it's pretty hard for a rookie, much less any quarterback, to succeed. In their defense, the free agent market wasn't great. Where I thought they erred was I thought that they could have moved up in the second round when there was a big runoff on left tackles, not right tackles, left tackles, and they could have snagged somebody there. That's not to say they didn't try, but I think they had to try a little harder to land one of the, you know, top left tackle prospects. Instead, they both signed in free agency and drafted right tackles.
Right.
So, and again, it's not that they, you know, right tackles can't play left. You know, Trent Brown played both sides equally well, but it's not as easy as as just snapping your fingers.
Right.
It's gonna take work, development, and they're still kind of in the process of trying to figure out what the heck to do on the left side. To help themselves, they moved Michael Onwenu over to right tackle. And it's a little easier to combat tackle weaknesses if you're okay on one side, you can help the other side. And I think their right side is going to be strong with both rookie Layden Robinson at right guard and Mike Onwenu at right tackle. So they're going to need to help out the other side, the left side, which is the blind side. But again, poor Jacoby Brissett is the guy who's going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much in agreement with you. I've kind of taken the philosophy when it comes to this that if you need the three, quarterback's obviously number one. But of the other two, I almost feel like while you need good receivers overall, if you're going to be a Super Bowl contender, that's what you need. But I feel like that's the third piece, and they kind of, they weren't aggressive enough as you were talking about, in not securing that offensive line security, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I did hear you talking with Dante Scarnecchia in the Eyes on Foxborough podcast, and that was great. So I encourage everybody to take a listen to that. But I think that
I just wanted to jump in. Scarnecchia was probably the best who's ever done it, or among the best. I don't want to shortchange the Bill Callahans of the world and whatnot, but I think for the longest time, the Patriots were spoiled by having him because, they would say, here's a wrestler, make him a lineman,
Sure.
And he did, or, here's a bunch of guys off the scrap heap, make it work.
Yeah.
And he did. So they get spoiled by the fact that, they didn't have to necessarily get the best of the best because Dante was so good at getting the most out of every guy he had on the line and making it work. So now the pressure is on Scott Peters to kind of do the same. Look, we don't have a left tackle for you, but you're going to have to kind of invent one.
Right.
And injuries haven't hurt. I mean, they thought Vidarian Lowe was going to be that guy, that, he would be serviceable. And by serviceable, I mean, they could get by with him with help on that side. And as I said, with Mike Onwenu on the right side, they don't have to worry about that. They don't have to send in running backs to help chip. They don't have to have tight ends stay in to help, block the edge rushers on that side.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to have to do it on the left no matter what. So, but as I said, if you had Scarnecchia, he would just make it all right. And somehow guys would magically block.
Yeah, the issues, especially on the offensive line, are something that I think have been brewing for a while. So they're obviously also there was a deficit before Eliot Wolf and company were the ones calling the shots. So it is, like you said, there's a long game. And if they end up getting, one of the top guys in this year's draft, like Will Campbell or something like that, maybe we're not worrying about this next year.
Well, and Chris, if we look at the team that they're playing on Sunday, Cincinnati, they got the quarterback first. They got Joe Burrow. The offensive line was terrible, and of course he got hurt his first year. But that allowed them in the next year, I thought they were going to get the tackle, a couple of I thought they were going to pick tackle, but no, they took Jamar Chase. They took the
Right.
weapon. And then after that, they finally addressed the line. And I kind of think it's been similar in other places. Josh Allen in Buffalo, when he started to show signs that he was going to be somebody, they got him the weapon, Stephon Diggs. Then they fixed the line. So other teams have had an order about this. And I think the Patriots, again, they have the quarterback. They did add some weapons, but they still need that
Right.
number one difference-making guy that teams have to pay attention to. Hey, it could be a tight end. We saw what Robert Gronkowski did when he was here. And then they will, address the line or try and get that primo left tackle. So, but again, nobody has patience. It's got to all happen at once.
Now, looking to this season, I know that it can be especially hard when you're facing an uphill battle as it is, but then especially as the season goes on and maybe losses are starting to chalk up, you need those leaders, not only the coaching staff, but in the locker room, who's going to help, preserve that buy-in and preserve the culture that you're trying to establish. And the Patriots just recently announced their captains. And looking at these captains and looking at the roster as a whole, are we identifying with these captains basically? Yeah, these are the leaders, or is there somebody else who maybe under the radar a little bit is somebody that can have influence on this team and especially on the younger guys?
Well, who's we? Is it the fans or is it the guys in the locker room that you're talking about?
In the locker room.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll identify the captains. Jacoby Brissett, David Andrews, Juwan Bentley, Dietrich Wise, Jabril Peppers, and Joe Cardona. So all the three phases of the game are represented. It's interesting. One guy
and you remember Jacoby Brissett this time, as opposed to
yes.
Jerod.
Yes, I did. It's interesting. Hunter Henry, tight end, was a captain last year and not this year. So that's you kind of wonder a little bit about that. But I mean, in this group, you still have two players, Andrews and Cardona, who are on championship teams. They have rings.
Sure.
And they've won before, and so there's that kind of bar that's set, or reminders as to what was and what we're shooting for. So I think Brissett is terrific. How he's approached, obviously being the placeholder. A lot of, he's getting his first chance to be a starter. And it's tough because he's also guiding Drake along. But, he's doing it without fail and without complaint and without being a jerk about it, whereas, there are famous stories about how Aaron Rodgers treated the backup, how others, they don't want to help the guy who's trying to take their job.
Right.
But Jacoby is very good in the role that he has. I like Jabril Peppers. He's more the guy on the field. He's their tone setter. Leads by example. Pretty much the same thing with Bentley. But there's so many other guys. I don't want to say so many, but there's other guys in the defensive room, whether it's John Jones, another guy who's won here, a veteran, Kyle Duggar, who's trying to ascend into a leadership role.
Right.
I do think there's, they have some some good character people in their locker room from which, to grow, I would say. So I think but again, man, if you start out 0-10, I don't think it matters much who's in that locker room. It ain't going to be fun. It ain't going to be.
Yeah, and I always wonder, how there are a lot of guys, especially on the defense, who have signed extensions, so they know that they're going to be here for the long haul. So I guess part of the challenge for Mayo and to a certain extent Eliot Wolf is continuing the message that there is a long game here. And yes, this really sucks right now, but this is part of a process, and you know to steal a cliche, trusting the process, I think could be a big thing for Mayo to, continue to be able to rely on these leaders to also convey that trust to the locker room.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think the players are well aware. I mean, Jonathan Jones said something about that yesterday, that they know that the expectations aren't great and they understand why. But I think they look at it as, this is the first part of how we're going to get up off the mat. And perhaps by midway or toward the end of the season, we're going to start winning and we're going to start beating people who people don't expect us to beat. And, it's going to take time. But I think there's a couple of important historical notes for Mayo or whoever to point out. When Bill Parcells first arrived in an obvious rebuild
Right.
situation, basically blowing things up and trying to, once again, get the Patriots off the mat. His first year, they started 5-11. And they only won one game in their first 10, but they won their last 4 in a row. And that was a sign of how they had progressed and how things had started to click, and they had a really good feeling going into the next year. And guess what? They made the playoffs in year 2. Bill Belichick, when he first took over, his first year, 5-11. They won 3 of their last 6 games. And again, they started to look like, things were starting to get together. The following year, they win the Super Bowl. So, I mean, there are examples of how these things start, evolve, and eventually you get to the place where you want to get to. So, and again, it's hard to go through losing when you're a player, but if they can continue to see the light at the end of the tunnel, if they can see the progress or see how things are evolving and developing, I think, again, this is a year that's going to set the stage for beyond. Now, if they go 0-17, it's going to be a tough sell. But I do think they'll win games. And I do think they'll have a few surprising wins in there. But as I said, you want the momentum to build up to where they're really playing or starting to look a lot better toward the end of the year.
So this kind of answers the last. You've kind of been talking about the last question that I had, and this was something you also wrote about recently in a column. Is what the reasonable expectation is for this team, and what would reasonably be called success. The funny thing is, I guarantee you, let's say they do, they won one game and then they rattle off, 4 wins in the last 6 or something like that. You're going to have people who are encouraged by the progress, but then at the same time wringing their hands that they're ruining their draft position. So I guess from your perspective, and you've talked a little bit about it already, but reasonably, what would you call success for this team?
Well, as I said, showing those signs of progress, looking like they're getting incrementally better as the year goes on. But I think the ultimate cherry on top, or the caveat to all of this, and again, it's questionable whether we'll see him or not, but the whole thing revolves around Drake May.
Right.
I can't imagine Jacoby Brissett surviving all 17 games without missing some time here or there. And it's in those spots where Drake May actually plays. He's the guy who's going to provide hope. He's going to inject life into this football team. And we saw some good things in the preseason. We also saw how much more he needs to develop. But once he gets in there, and if he shows, if he lives up to what people see him as, or he, looks like he might hit the potential everyone thinks he's going to be, that will be the best success quotient for the football team, is what Drake May looks like ultimately when he gets in.
All right. Well, Karen, thank you very much for taking the time with me today. It's very much appreciated. I'm very much looking forward to this season. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch. Maybe not always enjoyable to watch from a wins and loss standpoint, but I have to think just very quickly that it can't, at least offensively, it can't get much worse than last year, right?
Or the year before.
Or the year before.
Well, they averaged, they were the worst offense in the league. I mean, they averaged, I forget, it was 14.3 or 13.4 points a game. And that's like virtually in this day and age, that's like having no offense,
Right.
It's an offense driven league, and you can't, put, 14 points on the board. I mean, it's just, they lost games when the defense held the other team to 10 points.
Right. Yeah.
So, the object of the game is to score, and they're challenged in that area. So we'll see. We'll see what Alex Van Pelt does or can do. People have doubts. He's never been a play caller before. He's been a coordinator before, but hasn't called plays. How's that going to go over? Jerod Mayo has zero experience as a head coach. It's just, we're going to need a word that's like not a good word for people in New England: patience. That's like, that word does not compute in Titletown. But as I said, if they show signs of progress, if and when Drake May gets in and he looks like the real deal, the flicker of hope will be there going forward. And that's what you're looking for. If they go 0-17, that's going to be tough to swallow.
Right.
Yeah. Going backwards from 4-13. I think they need to win more than 4 games, but more importantly, if people see that the direction, if people see how it's coming together, and then when Drake May gets in there, and the light bulbs go on, I think they'll be in good stead.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining me. I know that this is obviously a busy time of year, so I appreciate the time. If you are not reading Karen Guregian, what are you even doing? Please, if you're a Patriots fan, if you're a sports fan, you should be reading Karen. You should be listening to the to the Eyes on Foxborough podcast. And Karen, have a great season.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Well, I really want to thank Karen for being a part of this conversation today. We had a lot of fun. I think that she had a lot of great insight on this season for the New England Patriots. If anybody is a fan like me, they remember some of the leaner times and, understand that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Now, there is an entire legion of fans who have known nothing but the success of the Bill Belichick era. So this is an uncertain time for them. But as Karen mentioned, this has happened before, and the Patriots have ended up coming out pretty okay on the other side. So, again, thank you very much to Karen. I also want to thank Emily from We Do Travel Right for participating and really spearheading the giveaway that we did. And congratulations to our winner, Leah Vasquez. And hopefully we'll be able to do more giveaways and things like this in the future. If you participated in the sweepstakes, I certainly appreciate you connecting with us, and I hope that you'll stick with us and keep listening. If you've connected with us on social media, welcome. We are very happy to have you. If you have given us a rating or a review, thank you very much. If you have not, please do that because it does help people find our podcast easier, and we can spread the fun and the insightful discussions that we have. And that's it. We're looking to have fun discussions, but we also want to be thoughtful with it too. So I hope that I'm bringing a little bit of that with every episode, whether it be myself and Eileen, or myself, Eileen and Megan, or myself and Megan, or with any of our other guests that we've had. We've had some terrific guests, and I really want to thank Karen again for being one of those. Again, you can contact me directly, mazasmusings@gmail.com. You can also visit our website, mazasmusings.wordpress.com. You can find us on social media. Instagram is Maza's Musings Pod, and you can also find us on Facebook, which is the Maza's Musings Podcast. Those are the places you can find us. We would love to interact with you. We do interact with everybody who reaches out to us. And if you have an idea for collaboration, I'd love to hear those too. Thank you very much for listening. I encourage you to listen to all of the other podcasts that I've talked about today. And also, I list other podcasts that you might find of interest in my newsletter as well. There's a whole network and there's a whole community of podcasts out there beyond mine that are just awesome to listen to, whether it's sports, whether it's Disney related, whether it's music related, or pop culture or whatever. There's something for everybody out there. I encourage you, if you're not an active podcast listener, check it out. Check it out beyond this podcast, because there's an entire universe out there that is really engaging, and a lot of great people doing a lot of great and interesting things. All right, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to enjoy some football this weekend. I hope you do too. And I hope you have a great weekend and a great week.